Okay, hello, hi everyone. I am Sunny and I wanted to talk to you about my experiences of having recently travelled around the world, especially my trip to India, which concluded at the beginning of this year, 2023. And I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I thought would be practical advice for anyone new to India, or going as an NRI or going as a return visitor. And the main thing to say here is I am Indian and I have had experience of going to India before, but this was my first solo trip. I had previously gone when I was younger as a child with my family, but we were usually very looked after and chaperoned and so on. So there wasn't really this opportunity to go off and do your own thing. Typically everything we wanted in terms of food, accommodation and purchasing things, eating things was usually taken care of. Secondly, just to note that this isn't necessarily a video about things such as where to stay and what to eat and what to see. I probably will make separate videos about that. This is just some practical advice, things that I came across as a recent visitor, which surprised me a little bit, and I thought I would want to share to make an experience for anyone else a little bit easier. To provide a bit of context around this, I had previously been touring Southeast Asia since September, so I'd started off in Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Singapore, and then I made the transition to India. I had thought that having been to those countries, India would also be, a piece of cake, and to a certain extent it was, but there were some definite learnings, and so that's what I'd like to get into now. So, number one is visas. Fortunately for me, this wasn't much of an issue because I have an OCI card. Now, an OCI card is an Overseas Citizen of India card, and it's something that you can apply for if you have a parent or you yourself have some sort of connection to India and have then been naturalised in the UK. For me, that was great because my father has been naturalised and he is from India, so I have the permission to get an OCI card, which means theoretically that I do not need a visa. And when I landed in Chennai from Singapore, it was not an issue, so that was great. However, that's not going to be the same for everyone. I have family and relatives and friends and so forth who are NRIs like me but cannot access OCI cards or cannot apply for OCI cards. In their position, they have applied for visas. I've recently been helping some friends and family apply for an e-visa. Now, e-visa is fairly straightforward. The thing to consider here is the fact that when you Google something like Indian e-visa application, you're going to come across many different websites. And a lot of these sites are just copycat sites, and I don't put that much trust in these sites. It's very difficult to tell what is genuine and what isn't. It's not. This is where I do kind of owe some credit to gov.uk, for example, because you can tell by its UX that it's the correct site that you need to be on. You look for your security certificate for your HTTPS in the toolbar, for example, and it was never really clear to me when applying for official documents in India whether I was on the correct website. So the easiest workaround for this is simply to go to your local country's government website. In the case of the UK, it's gov.uk or FCO. So I went to FCO, I went to the India page, and I basically just searched entry requirements, and there's a visa section there, and it will take you off to the correct URL that you need to be on. You can apply for an e-visa for up to 5 years. And having done that remotely from home, all you need is a good photograph and a PDF copy of your passport. The thing to bear in mind that even though it's a government website, the UX is still particularly disconcerting. Like, it's not suited to mobile, and you will find that as you expand and contract the page, things kind of fall out of alignment, but trust assured that if this is the correct link, it is definitely the website that you want. I've recently just successfully completed this for a couple of people, so I can testify to that. So that's your visa situation sorted. Sorry, there's just one thing I did forget, which is that you will have to, this is quite strange, but you will have to adhere to small file sizes when uploading things like photographs and PDFs. I used Canva as a free online design tool to upload my photographs and my PDFs and just resize them. If you've got a Mac, you can resize a PDF fairly quickly just in the save option if you don't have access to Adobe Acrobat or something like that. So that's that. Okay, the next thing is I want to talk about is SIM cards, and this is my bugbear and my sore point with travelling to India. So, for a bit of context, the situation in India is very unlike going to places like Thailand and Vietnam, etc., where it's very easy to just go to a shop and purchase a SIM card, especially at the airport. This was not the case in India. There has been a lockdown on access to SIM cards for people who don't have some sort of government ID, which makes it very difficult for people like me, as visitors, as tourists, to access a SIM card. And you think, well, why do I need a SIM card? I can just use an eSIM or something like that. The reason you need a SIM card is because certain apps will rely on OTPs, or one-time passcodes, for two-factor authentication, or just some sort of authentication. Now, I learnt this the hard way. I didn't really look into it before because I'd been just purchasing SIM cards and eSIMs as I went along. At Thailand, I bought one at the airport. When I was in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, I was only there for a couple of days, so it did not make much sense for me to purchase an actual SIM card, and I just downloaded data for duration of 48 to 72 hours, etc. And it's perfectly fine. It gives you access to things like Uber and Grab, and you don't have to worry about getting these passcodes. I got to India, and in Chennai I spotted that there was no SIM card shop. So it didn't really matter so much because I was going to just use the conventional taxi system where you kind of pay the guy at the airport and he gives you a receipt and you get shown to a driver. That had its own complications, which I'll probably get into another time. I don't want to get sidetracked here. But what I quickly realised is that I wasn't going to find a SIM card. I asked my hotel and they named a couple of shops around the corner from where I was staying. I ended up staying in the wrong neighbourhood, but again, another conversation for another time. Eventually I found a Vodafone shop, which was about 3 kilometres away from my hotel, and me being me, decided I would walk there because I did not want to get an auto rickshaw. The reason being is because I had previously taken an auto rickshaw to try and go to another mobile phone shop the same day earlier on, and he had completely fleeced me when I understood what the cost of these trips was. Eventually I realised that I'd overpaid and sort of made me reluctant to use one again. Also, I like the exercise. But obviously, if you're walking anywhere in India, just be mindful of traffic and all of that. Anyway, I got to this Vodafone shop. I did also try Airtel as well, which is an Indian network. And the crux of it is that you need an Aadhaar card, which is basically like a local government ID. Now, I don't have one because I'm not an Indian citizen per se. I'm not I wasn't born in India. However, I showed them my British passport and I showed them my OCI card, and they said, okay, well, that's great in terms of ID and us seeing who you are, but it doesn't give us that final level of certification that they needed. And beyond that, I didn't really know what else to do. I mean, I've looked into it, and now I think I can apply for an Aadhaar card, but I mean, there are lots of loopholes to go through to try and get one. I'm not going to get into that right now, but it was really problematic. And I thought, okay, well, there must be some other solution. And they're like, okay, well, the way we work around this is if someone can verify your identity. And it's like, well, you have my passport, so that should verify my identity, but they need a secondary reference. Now, I didn't know anyone in Chennai. I have family up in the north of India, but that person needs to be present with you. So I asked how other people did this, what other businessmen and tourists and etc. do. And they're like, well, we had a couple of people in here a couple of days ago and they were staying at the Holiday Inn and they got their hotel manager to come by to verify their ID. Now, my hotel was 3 kilometres down the road. But also, I wasn't going to go and drag him or her down to this mobile phone shop. It seemed very excessive, and I was pretty adamant that something could be done. So I tried a couple of other shops, and unfortunately I was getting the same thing. Long story short, 2-3 days into this, I kept on going back to the VI shop, to the Vodafone store, because that's the network I have in the UK. And eventually, I think they sort of took pity on me, and they tried to put the application through by going through as many different loopholes as possible. But to the point where I felt like the guy at the shop knew me well enough to act as my referee, so he did. And eventually it went through. There was this one minor complication where they were submitting a photograph of myself. In actual fact, it was a photograph of the photo page of my passport onto the VI application form. And because of the shininess of the lights and the reflection of that page, the website wasn't accepting it. So that in itself kind of, threw me into a tizzy. But, well, the good news is the application went through, they issued me with a SIM card, and I got an Indian number, which was great. So I could put that in my phone, and I could download and use Ola, and I could use many of the other apps that they have, and everything was great. So I managed to order a cab. I was given an OTP, and you show that to the driver, and the driver puts it into his section of the app on his phone, and everything's hunky-dory, and you can go to where you need to go. By that point, I was exhausted, so I went straight to the mall because it was familiar and comfortable and air-conditioned. But then I did venture out to more interesting places after that. So that was my big learning with SIM cards. There is one other way around this, which is just to use the native SIM card that you came into the country with. So this could be your SIM card from home. The only thing you have to be mindful of there is that you will most likely be paying the roaming fee for using your phone abroad. When I went to Delhi in 2019 with my family, I did this, but it was only a period of just over a week, so I was prepared to pay the £6 to £8 that you pay for daily usage. Given that I was in India for 5 weeks this time, I did not want to do that because, I had to think about the long-term budget here, so I didn't do that. The alternate solution, which was what I was going to do, was to forego the use of data altogether and my SIM card, and simply just try and organise transport in places where I had Wi-Fi. Now, until I got my SIM card, that worked out okay. It doesn't give you the OTP, unfortunately, so that is still the issue. But it's fine for kind of, let's say if you just wanted to order some takeaway food or something like that, it should work. Because I don't think every takeaway service like Swiggy and Zomato will want an OTP. In tricky situations, what you can do, and my advice is to go and speak to a trusted person in a shop or a cafe, etc. And if you have no access to data or Wi-Fi whatsoever, you can just tether while you order your cab or do something like that, or, do what you need to do. And that is something that I had to do on a few occasions. The reason all of this is, when I was asking around, is partly to do with security. I think the government is basically just trying to crack down on who has access to their phone networks, so that, in former incidents of terrorism, they can track down people if they need to. And that's what I was told. So I think that's the issue. Whether or not this continues, I don't know, but it's something to be mindful of. Well, that was that. This then brings me on to my third thing, which is using the rideshare services themselves. Now, I had an international credit card, which in most places worked pretty well. Not every establishment in India is going to accept an international card. So you have to have some sort of alternate means of hooking up your rideshare app to some sort of alternate credit source. Sometimes PayPal works, sometimes it doesn't. For me, I was using my international credit card, and occasionally when I found that it wasn't working, I would switch to Monzo, which seemed to work. So if you've got something like a cash card like a Monzo or Starling, you can try that instead, and it might prove better. I had to remember to switch that back when I got to the UK, because I was taking an Uber the other night and it just wasn't working, and I realised I had maxed out my Monzo credits, so I had to switch back to my usual credit card. So Uber works perfectly well in most towns and cities. In Chennai, I found similarly to other parts of Southeast Asia, they do also offer the bike services. They also have access to auto rickshaws, as does Ola. When I was going from Chennai to Pondicherry, that's considered an outstation ride. Now, an outstation ride is simply where you're going for a one-way, usually it's one-way, ride out of town. So, you know, it was unlike my formative experiences of going to India where like a parent or a guardian would speak to a driver and would have a driver for like, you know, the duration of our summer holidays or anything like that. I just wanted a one-time trip. I was able to organise this through Ola. I used Ola in this instance, and it was perfectly fine in terms of making the booking. I got a confirmation to say that your ride is ready for tomorrow. Come 9 o'clock and the driver isn't there, and I'm like freaking out, thinking, what's wrong with this? I've got to get out of my Airbnb. It simply turns out that for him to get from Chennai to Pondicherry, he needed a document, some sort of validation, which was, you know, he needed for the authorities. There had been a cyclone the night before, and the idea was that he could use this permit to get from city to city, as it were. But he was unable to communicate that to me effectively, and I was just running around my apartment going slightly crazy, not really knowing what else to do. At some point I cancelled the booking and I tried to speak to him and rebook it, and he took the new booking because it seemed like he was the only one who wanted to do this journey. Luckily, I was able to get in touch with my host, who was able to speak to the Ola driver and communicate to me what the issue was, which put me at rest. But, you know, it was just a case of being lost in translation at that point. Being mindful that I can speak Punjabi and Hindi, but I can't speak Tamil. So there we go. Yeah, so that was that. Also, Ola would not accept a credit card from me, so I set it to cash only. Now, most rideshare drivers prefer that. They prefer cash in hand because there is a delay in them getting the money from the rideshare service if you opt for credit card. Credit card is usually preferable because you don't have to faff around with small notes, but, you know, they might think otherwise. One time I took I used an Uber and I ordered an auto rickshaw to take me from my apartment to one of the malls that I was visiting, and a guy came along and he took me there, and at the end he asked me for cash. And I was like, well, you're going to get the money from the credit card. And I think deep down he might have understood that, but he was trying to sort of say to me, look, that's not enough, and B, he's not going to get that money for a couple of days. It's like, well, that's not really my problem. Again, just a case of being lost in translation here. Luckily, it was an auto rickshaw and I was able to swiftly run away. But, like, he was disappointed and I was sad to disappoint him. But, you know, it's just a case of, like, setting these boundaries before you take that journey. But there we go. That was a learning experience for me. Aside from that, occasionally what you'll get is just people accepting your ride and then cancelling your ride if they change their minds or if it's not convenient for them, which is incredibly frustrating sometimes. I had to make it in Bangalore one time, I had to make it from one part of town to another, and I was waiting for nearly an hour because it was rush hour, the traffic was crazy, and people just looked at the roads and they thought, no, I'm not. Okay, so apologies, I just rambled on for way too long there, and my video was accidentally cut short by Filmic Pro. But to cut a long story short, I think I've made the main points that I wanted to make there. My main purpose in making this video is just to help anyone planning a forthcoming trip to India about some of these logistics. So by all means, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line in the comments below and I will do my best to engage with you to answer any burning questions. Secondly, to say this is probably one of my first pieces to camera on YouTube, and I do want to make more videos, but I am not going through a lot of the bells and whistles in this instance because I didn't record a lot of B-roll, I don't have a mic, etc. I don't have a proper studio set up, so that's just something I'll work towards. But for now, if you are interested in seeing any of the reels or the images from my trip, head on over to my Instagram, which is sunnyplant. There'll be a link on my page down below as well. And yeah, just check out the fun and games that I got up to. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to make more travel videos to do with things like what I packed, what I wore, or where I went, and all the other fun and games I had. Till then, goodbye.